Hi, this is Shekinah Banag, psychiatric technician student. I was very close to a family who had someone with severe autism. This individual was nonverbal and displayed self-interest behavior and also had aggressive tendencies. So much so that his mom would have bruises on her arms and legs, and they would have holes in their walls. Like I would come over and then they would just have a new hole in the wall and then be like, oh, Nathan, we'll call him Nathan. Oh, Nathan, he got upset and he just punched through the wall. So it was like, that was like a normal thing for them. I remember the most used intervention for him were, he would have to be restrained sometimes because he would punch through walls or knock things over or, hit himself or other people. So they would have to restrain him, and they do it by bear hugging him. The team involved for Nathan consisted of his parents, his sister. He was seeing his primary care. He was seeing a behavioral therapist, and he also had caregivers. Nathan, who is the individual I'm going to be talking most about, he had a very, very severe form. As I've mentioned, he was nonverbal. He had self-interest behavior, and he was often aggressive towards others. So I had no awareness of the levels of severity of autism until I met Nathan and his family. And this is the thing I noticed about him. He would be so perceptive and receptive. So, let's say his sister had a bad day and she comes home grumpy, not wanting to talk to anyone. She's not her usual self. She doesn't interact with Nathan as she does usually. As a reaction, the frequency of Nathan's misbehaviors would increase. He'd shout more and louder. He'd hit himself more, walk around and knock stuff over. Keeping that in mind, Nathan's interdisciplinary team expected him to act this way, act on the increase of misbehaviors when his parents decided on getting a divorce. That in itself is already strenuous to anyone, and I can only imagine how, Nathan had felt as that was happening. And I thought it was an appropriate conclusion to make because it's a major life event, and Nathan's interdisciplinary team knew that he would be affected this way. Because of the stress building and actively affecting Nathan, he did do what was expected, as in he shouted more, shouted louder, he didn't sleep well, he hit himself more, he hit others more, he became more aggressive. As far as I remember, there weren't really any assumptions made by team members that made the encounter less effective, besides the ones that were initially made considering his behavior and how that can be affected. I think everything else came after the misbehaviors occurred and became more frequent. I remember our lecture on restraints and how, if Nathan became a harm to himself or a harm to others, that, which happened often while the divorce was going on, that he can be put in a restraint. And, it's not like they used actual devices or anything. They just restrained him by bear hugging him. But the caregivers and Nathan's family would have to always be physical with him, either to protect him or themselves. Usually before the divorce was going on or before he was put in a very high stress situation, Nathan would respond well to visual gestures and verbal cues and all that just fine. In that way, he was well behaved. So seeing how he went from that to how his behavior became observably different, nothing was done really to try and lower it back to where he was, or even, try to lower the frequency of how often it occurred. And I think maybe it's because everyone assumed this was how he was going to act, but not in the severity. So then home life became stressful for him. So it all boiled up to a point, and it just was so bad. Nathan bit one of the caregivers so badly that like a portion, like a chunk of her arm was like just not there. But what made it worse was mom didn't express as much concern or, sincerity as expected. His mom just, oh, he's just stressed. You know how he is. Of course, you can't necessarily blame him, but that doesn't mean that the caregiver's feelings and whatnot should just be pushed aside and not taken into consideration at all. And that alone in itself, added more to Nathan's distress. Oh, I 100% believe that specific skills could have advanced the discussion and plans for Nathan and his family. There should have been some sort of intervention, some sort of action to prevent his misbehaviors from happening more and more and getting worse. Personally, when I become a professional with a unique skill set of my own, and I encounter challenging interdisciplinary situations much like this one, I would want to be open-minded and accepting of anything that can help our client, whether that comes from, the team or somewhere else. I would definitely intentionally seek advice from other professionals who might see the situation differently and may even offer, a great solution. I hope this experience and the knowledge gained from it will help me one day when I get to where I want to be.